Have you ever canceled plans, felt a wave of relief instead of guilt, and thought, finally, I can just be by myself? Not lonely, not sad, just peaceful. Meanwhile, somewhere out there, someone is posting photos from a crowded dinner table captioned, "Best night ever." And you're sitting on your couch, wrapped in a blanket, genuinely feeling like you're the one winning. For a long time, society has treated this preference like a problem to fix. If you enjoy being alone more than socializing, people assume you must be shy, awkward, antisocial, or secretly miserable. You've probably heard it before. You should get out more. Don't isolate yourself. Humans are social creatures, as if enjoying solitude is some kind of software glitch in your personality. But psychology tells a very different story. The truth is, people who genuinely enjoy being alone are often not avoiding life. They're engaging with it in a completely different way. Let's start with what's happening in your brain. When most people socialize, their reward system lights up. Dopamine flows from interaction, novelty, shared laughter, group energy. But for some individuals, especially those with more introverted neurological wiring, that same environment can be overstimulating rather than rewarding. It's not that they dislike people. It's that their nervous system processes stimulation more intensely. Imagine two radios. One needs the volume turned up to feel the music. The other is already loud at level 3. If you crank both to 10, one person is energized while the other feels overwhelmed. People who enjoy solitude tend to have brains that are already loud enough. Being alone isn't deprivation. It's calibration. Research on introversion, particularly work inspired by psychologist Hans Eysenck, suggests that introverts have higher baseline cortical arousal. In simple terms, their brains are already more active internally. They don't need as much external input to feel engaged. So while others seek stimulation, solitude lovers often seek regulation. This is why a crowded party can feel like trying to think inside a flashing casino, while sitting alone with your thoughts feels like finally stepping into a quiet library where everything makes sense again. And here's where the misunderstanding begins. People assume solitude equals disconnection. But psychologically, solitude is often where these individuals feel most connected, to their own thoughts, creativity, emotions, and sense of identity. When you enjoy being alone, your brain shifts into what neuroscientists call the default mode network. This is the system associated with introspection, memory integration, imagination, and self-reflection. It's the mental space where you process who you are and what your experiences mean. In a way, solitude is not empty. It's cognitively full. Think about how many insights arrive when you're alone. In the shower, during a quiet walk, late at night when the world finally stops talking. That's not accidental. That's your brain doing deep integration work that's almost impossible when constantly reacting to social input. Historically, many thinkers, writers, and innovators deliberately sought solitude for this exact reason. Not because they disliked humanity, but because stepping away from noise allowed them to understand it better. Virginia Woolf called it a room of one's own. Carl Jung built a retreat tower in Bollingen where he could think without interruption. Even Darwin structured long periods of isolation into his daily routine because he knew his best ideas required uninterrupted reflection. These weren't antisocial people. They were psychologically attuned to how their minds function best. But enjoying solitude isn't only about thinking deeply. It's also about emotional regulation. Social interaction, even pleasant interaction, requires constant micro-adjustments. You monitor facial expressions, tone, timing, expectations. You're reading signals, responding appropriately, filtering what you say, managing impressions. It's like running dozens of background apps at once. People who enjoy being alone often experience this as cognitive fatigue rather than fun. Alone time becomes the moment when all those apps finally close. The brain exhales. That sense of relief you feel when plans are canceled? It's not rejection of others. It's recovery of mental bandwidth. Another fascinating aspect is autonomy. Psychologists studying self-determination theory talk about autonomy as a core human need, just like connection and competence. Some people satisfy that need through independence rather than interaction. They feel most like themselves when they are not performing roles, negotiating expectations, or adapting to group dynamics. In solitude, there is no audience, no script, no subtle pressure to be entertaining, agreeable, responsive. Just you existing as you are. For many, that's not loneliness. That's authenticity. And ironically, people who enjoy being alone often form deeper, more meaningful relationships precisely because they are selective. They don't socialize for quantity. They connect for quality. Instead of dozens of surface-level interactions, they invest in fewer relationships that feel genuine and psychologically safe. It's like comparing fast food to a home-cooked meal. One is quick and frequent. The other takes intention and time, but it nourishes differently. Of course, there's also a cultural layer to all of this. Modern society rewards visibility. Being constantly reachable, constantly sharing, constantly engaging has become the default. Social media amplifies this expectation, making it seem like everyone else is always surrounded by people, always doing something louder, brighter, more social. But what you don't see is how many of those people also crave quiet moments and don't allow themselves to take them. People who naturally enjoy solitude often become accidental rebels against this cultural momentum. They resist the pressure to fill every silence. And psychologically, that resistance can actually protect mental health. Studies have shown that intentional solitude is associated with reduced stress, increased creativity, and improved emotional clarity. Notice the word intentional. There's a big difference between chosen solitude and forced isolation. One is nourishing. The other is painful. People who enjoy being alone aren't trapped in it. They return to it willingly, the same way someone might return to a favorite place. There's also a misconception that enjoying solitude means lacking social skills. In reality, many solitude-preferring individuals are highly perceptive socially. They notice subtleties others miss. They read emotional undercurrents. But because they process those signals deeply, interaction can feel more intense, not less. It's like having emotional surround sound while others hear in stereo. And then there's creativity. Solitude has long been linked to imagination because the brain, when not occupied with reacting, starts generating. It wanders. It builds connections. It experiments internally. This is why boredom, which often precedes creative thought, is something solitude lovers tolerate better. They don't rush to eliminate it. They let it open doors. When you spend time alone without distraction, your mind starts asking questions it normally doesn't have time to ask. Who am I becoming? What do I actually enjoy? Why did that moment matter to me? These questions don't shout. They whisper. And you can only hear whispers in quiet spaces. Of course, enjoying solitude can come with challenges. The world isn't always designed for this temperament. You may feel misunderstood. You may wonder if you're missing out. You may push yourself into social environments that drain you because you think that's what you're supposed to want. But psychology suggests something important here. Well-being doesn't come from matching someone else's ideal social life. It comes from aligning your environment with your temperament. Some people thrive in crowds. Some people thrive in calm. Neither is more human than the other. In fact, when people who enjoy solitude honor that preference instead of fighting it, they often become more present when they do socialize. Because they're not depleted. They're choosing interaction rather than enduring it. Think of solitude as charging a battery that others recharge through conversation. Different outlets. Same goal. And here's a subtle but powerful shift. Enjoying being alone doesn't mean you're withdrawing from the world. It often means you're building a stronger internal one. You're developing self-trust, self-awareness, and the ability to be comfortable without constant validation. That's not avoidance. That's psychological resilience. If you can sit with yourself and feel at ease, you're not lacking connection. You've established one of the most important connections there is. So the next time you find yourself looking forward to a quiet evening instead of a noisy gathering, maybe don't interpret it as something you need to fix. Maybe it's simply how your mind restores itself. Maybe it's where you think best, feel best, understand life best. And maybe there are more people like you than it seems. People who don't dislike others, but who also don't fear silence. People who know that being alone and being lonely are not the same thing at all. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear how solitude shows up in your life. What does your version of recharging look like? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring the psychology behind everyday behaviors like this, stick around and subscribe, because there's a lot more about the human mind we're going to unpack together.